I'm Richard Porter.
I'm Jonny Smith.
And this is On the Other Side of Things, the Smith & Sniff spin-off in which we answer your questions. Yes, here we are again, answering listeners' questions on a Friday. And Jonny and I are in my house. So
we're in the house, as they would say.
Literally in the house. But also, Jonny's got his laptop and is poring over questions from listeners. I was going to, just
Colossal.
for sake of convenience, because I've just found this one, is a question from a patron called Magnus Svenningsson.
Okay.
And he says, "Hi there, SSGs. How did people get out of their cars in a British standard garage?" It's a very simple question. I think there's a very simple answer.
Cars were narrow.
Yeah.
Cars were small.
I mean, if you see something like an Austin A30...
Oh my gosh, it's tiny.
It's just like looking at a big jacket. It's an astonishingly narrow car.
It's like a jacket potato with doors.
Which... I wonder... I mean, I won't get bogged down in checking this now, but I wonder if... Would an A30 fall within K-car rules? I bet it would on width.
I bet it would. Yeah, I bet it would.
Because you know how K-cars are sort of, when you see one, particularly in Britain, in the context of other bigger cars, they're sort of startlingly small.
Yeah.
But an A30 is startlingly small.
It's very small, which is why it was a bit tippy as a race car, a historic race car in latter days.
Is it also partly the problem is that tyres have got more grippy, and it's like they don't want that.
No.
They need slithery tyres, because otherwise they'll just topple like a sleeping cow.
You're absolutely right. That's what it is.
But even like an Austin 1100 is an alarmingly small car in the modern context. I mean, it's a Mini.
Mini's tiny. Yeah, yeah.
Weirdly.
Or Fiat 500, I mean.
Yeah.
Part next to a modern Fiat 500. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they're ridiculous. So,
hilarious.
There we go, Magnus. I mean, it's just, cars have got bigger, but garages haven't, which is why everyone just uses them to store crap and keep a chest freezer now. But that's okay, because cars are much better proofed against the outdoors.
Yeah, that's true. Although not invincible. Got a question from Monza Mike, who is a Patreon of ours, and the name will become apparent shortly. Hi. Back in the 80s, I owned an Opel Manta GTE coupe in red. It had a manual Getrag 5-speed. The gear change feel was super snicky and fun to use. Once I'd worked out how to silence the clutch pedal squeak. Funny you should say that. My Dodge Charger has an incredibly irritating clutch squeak. This gearbox had Synchromesh on reverse. He's written that in capital letters.
Oh.
This
quite a novelty in the 80s.
Yeah. This made for startlingly rapid 3-point turns! ! Really upsets passengers too. They just don't expect you to start going backwards immediately after stopping. So Mike's question is, what other cars have got synchro on reverse? I once drove a 6-speed manual Lexus IS 200 and I think that did too.
Yeah.
I've had no real luck Googling this either. Over to you, SSGs, CMTMB, Monza Mike. Thanks for being a Patreon, Monza Mike.
I mean, I couldn't be specific, but I do remember that one of the things that they were quite proud of at the launch of the Rover 75 was synchro on reverse.
Really?
The feeling being... Now, I think, did the manual box... Was that a Getrag manual box in those? I can't remember. It was a Jatco automatic, I remember that, but I think it might have been a Getrag manual. And so, sorry, this is my dog
There's
licking
herself.
herself.
There's a dog licking itself next
you
to
can
us.
hear a weird noise. It's not, we're not taking turns like cleaning ourselves while the other one's talking, like big cats. Yeah, and I think it was because it was an extra cost involved, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was deemed to be a premium feature. Because basically, it's like the reason to put synchro on reverse is just so that when you do a rapid change in reverse, it doesn't grunge, or it won't go in and you have to double declutch.
Which no one will do.
No one will do. Like, normal people don't do that, do they? It's like people like us probably do because we're a bit like that. But
Yeah.
so I would say yes, the Rover 75, but I don't know. Do a lot of... I would say it's a price thing, isn't it? It's just a cost implication for the manufacturer. So above a certain price of car, it possibly is something that incrementally, as cars have got more refined.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So
I mean,
like a
gearboxes
Golf.
are more forgiving than they ever were.
Yes.
What's sad almost is that if a car was furnished with a synchro reverse and it was never referenced in any of the sales for literature, because let's face it, people don't buy cars and even ask or think to ask or know what the fuck that is. They don't. They'll want to know whether it's got Apple CarPlay, and they'll want to know whether it's got halo lights when you open the doors, which cast a lovely silhouette of a car that you're driving on the ground. Puddle light, they call it, don't they?
Yes.
Which none of that really interests me. I'd much rather have synchro on reverse, and it is a bit partridge talking about synchro in reverse, I think. But nevertheless, it's an important question, which I very much appreciate Mons and Mike.
On that note, do you remember we had a question recently on Otosot where someone said, did people genuinely buy brand new cars and then just never check the oil or do anything to them?
Yeah.
We had a email from a listener. I'm not going to name him just in case, because he says, I'd like to answer a question that was asked in Otosot 29. Do people buy a new car and not do any maintenance? I work for a small independent used car dealer, and I used to work for a big Scottish yellow branded dealer network.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we know that. I can 100% confirm people will buy new/nearly new cars and not do a single bit of maintenance or servicing until the first MOT, when it'll fail on bald tyres and worn brakes.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
I find this mildly frustrating, as I service my own Mark 1 MX-5 at least once a year, sometimes twice, though it only does 4,000 to 5,000 miles a year. And I check all the fluids and tyres monthly, sometimes more. It's borderline neglect to leave a car unmaintained and uncleaned for 2 to 3 years, but it definitely does happen. So
it is, but also it's, you're expecting a car to be like a magic wand, and just never wear out and never go wrong and never do all those things. But it's just simply not true, as you know, and that's why it's a lack of education, I think.
yeah,
I know I sound a bit judgy. I'm not supposed to. I'm not trying to sound like that. What I mean is that people should know that these are machines, and you should give them a little bit of love and respect and visual checking. Otherwise, you're driving around in a 18-month-old Cayenne that's worth 90 grand on completely bald front tyres.
I mean, that's terrifying, isn't it?
Makes you look like a flute.
Yeah. We've got another patron question. This is from Greg Dash. He says he was recently.
I was waiting for what was coming on.
Greg Dash something else. No, his surname is Dash. I was recently at Leafy Prescott, he says, for their rally meet with an E. And someone was running an Audi RS6 C6 Avant, the V10 one, on winter tyres. Bloody hell. I bet that moved around quite a lot. Greg says, it got me thinking, what would be the most inappropriate hill climb car? Excluding, of course, 4x4s, SUVs, pickups, etc. There has to be a car. I think for me it's either a Fiat Multipla or a long wheelbase Bentley Mulsanne.
Oh, I can better those. Did you say most inappropriate hill climb car?
Yeah, well, Greg's point is that he says if you took the Mulsanne, you'd likely have to do a little 3-point turn to get around the tighter corners, and part of the skill would be executing that as quickly as possible. But then surely, if we rocked up with the Eagle Quest...
Oh, yeah. I've actually been thinking about whether we should have the engine warmed over. I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this off mic. But I had a little bit of a dream, a slightly sado dream, that we'd had it warmed over. and we put an LSD in it, and we'd had some head work done, as they used to say.
Bloody hell, this has just reminded me. I had a very vivid dream the other night that I was following a late model Fox body Mustang out of some kind of car meet. It was in Britain,
Yeah.
so it was light because it wasn't an obscene time in the early hours of the morning. On a absolutely sluicing wet motorway, but we were leaving like a service area, and there was an incredible amount of standing water, and this Mustang just hit this patch of standing water and just flipped in the air, did a kind of mad rail slide, and then flipped over onto its roof and slid onto the hard shoulder of the opposing carriageway. It was all really quite horrific.
That's traumatic, yeah.
It was traumatic, but it was
But you
very
don't know why-
vivid.
you don't know why you...
No, but the worst thing was, I was like, in the dream, I was like, oh my God, I need to phone the emergency services, and then I need to phone you and tell you what I've just seen. And then I woke up, and you know that sometimes you wake up from a very vivid dream and you're kind of like, is that something real that just happened that I forgot? No, it's just a dream. It's okay. But then I sort of thought, that's terrible. That.
Fox body Mustang leaving an event viciously.
But also, I mean, the driver in the stream was driving like an absolute bell. Like, he floored it.
Yeah, and was driving it one-handed almost.
Probably, yes. Leaving the services with a big coffee on the go. And you're like, why would you floor it when it's sluicing with rain and you're in a very crude rear wheel drive?
It's a floor mat slip scenario.
Oh. That happened to someone I know this week, that they were in a Dacia Duster,
Well-known performance vehicle.
high performance vehicle, and suddenly, it was dark, early morning, they're leaving early. Suddenly, the massive flare of revs, and it surged forward like the throttle was stuck open. And the floor mat had rubber floor mats. The rubber floor mat had hooked over the accelerator pedal.
And floored it.
But in a split second, they didn't know what was going on. Thankfully, it was a manual, just dipped the clutch, banged it into neutral, and then sort of assessed the situation. But as they did that, it was, wow!
Oh, I
Really?
weren't trying to sneak out the
No.
cul-de-sac early doors to avoid.
I don't know. I didn't ask that.
This
detail.
isn't a question from the listeners, by the way.
I have a question here from Philip Haas. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm sorry, Philip, it's not. He says, I have some questions about the current state and future of car culture. Let me preface this by saying that I've been a petrol head all my life, from a kid lusting after green and purple Kawasaki Ninjas in the 90s to attending F1 at Spa in the ear-splitting V8 era, or watching embarrassing amounts of car content on YouTube. Reluctantly, I have somewhat fallen out of love with car culture, particularly online. Negativity seems to dominate, from silly things like the Jaguar rebrand to pretty much anything EV related. Frankly, I get the impression that many of the loudest voices in the online automotive space are closed-minded people that reject anything new or different and believe a V12 should be a basic human right. While I agree that some car companies are currently missing the mark or fumbling the EV transition, I still find this attitude very disappointing. To me, being a car guy means celebrating the past while embracing the future, especially if that future is less shitty for the environment. The Ioniq 5N that recently overtook me at well over 200 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn certainly gave me hope. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think car culture is in a good place? What needs to change? Where would you like to see car culture in 50 years?
50?
50, that's what...
Goodness me.
I'm pretty confident, Phil, that I'll be dead by then, but I suppose it'd be nice to know where it would be.
That's a jolly one, Rich.
I know. Well, it's got to be realistic about this, but
Yeah, true.
I don't know. Well, medical science, maybe not. Maybe I'll still be here wanging on about this stuff. But it is an interesting question, because I think it is, because
It's more tribal.
Yeah, it's more tribal and partly because I think social media accentuates this need to sort of pick a side, which is ridiculous in a way.
Yeah.
And I know that's always been the case with car culture. If you think about sort of like Ford versus Holden or Ford versus Chevy in Australia and the US, and I suppose a bit of Ford Vauxhall here, but it was much less
And
aggressive.
Japanese versus domestic in those Western countries. And
Yeah. But do you think that actually, in a way, on the one hand, it's become more tribal in as much as you can find your tribe through the internet, and then you can go to the shows that your tribe organises.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing, because if you really love JDM cars or Italian cars or something like that, and you've got places like Cafe and a Machine that then specifically organise nights for that, but hopefully they're quite inclusive, and they'll just go, if you're just kind of Italian curious, come on down, and there's going to be a bunch of people here with Fiat Barchettas and Dinos and things, and they're just come down and hang out. And in that way, it seems to have broadened out. But it's good. You can find your tribe, but you can also find a new tribe if you really want to. Yeah. I think the problem is social media and arguing about stuff.
You are right. I think the social media is an absolute double-edged sword. It has allowed you to find ultra niches. And I let them be celebrated or let their voices be heard. But you are right. I think something's happened where people, I guess, angry people get louder.
Yes, they're definitely amplified. And I suppose Phil's other point about sort of negativity and things. It's the loudest voices are sometimes giving a false impression.
Yeah.
I think sometimes they flood the arena with their noise, and it is not necessarily true. And
totally agree.
You look at everyone that we talk to at our live shows, or everyone we talk to like when we go to together or individually to car shows, you meet some of the most thoughtful and intelligent people who have deep knowledge and understanding and consideration, not only for the subject matter, but for each other as well.
Yeah.
And so it would be nice to think that is the actual majority. And unfortunately, a noisy minority sort of skews the field a little bit and makes you think the worst of it. So I suppose, to answer Phil's question, one of the great things is, I suppose, that the online world allows people to then formulate the real world meets, and I've no evidence for this, but I suspect there are more car meetups going on now than there ever were.
Yeah.
And there you can find your tribe, but you can also just go to something a little bit broader, like Festival of the Unexceptional. It's a great example. I mean, that was what I know that now sort of young people talk about vibes a lot.
Yeah, they do.
The vibes at Festival of the Unexceptional were superb. It had such a good atmosphere.
It was great.
It was so fantastic. But then equally, the vibes at Festival of Speed or Revival,
Retro Rides,
Retro
really
Rides. I've never been, but you always enjoy that, didn't you?
It's very appreciative of other people's, and also what it allow. I suppose what social media does, it gives you all this knowledge, is it allows you to hopefully think about other types of cars, denominations of cars or vehicles in general that you otherwise wouldn't have. And what my hope is that it allows, like, say, younger people to visit different eras of cars and genres of cars that they'd never thought about. And as I get older, I notice that I do it. I look at cars with a slightly different view. I go, I've never really taken much notice of 1940s cars. And I thought, I've looked at a few, and someone with a massive amount of passion has gone, did you know that this was that? And that was really important at that moment in time for that. And you go, oh, that's quite cool. And then instead of being more and more blinkered as I get older, I'm trying to go wider screen. Because life's too short and there's a shitload of interesting vehicles out there.
I think the other thing is that there is a danger that new cars can seem terribly bland and homogenous. And some people say, well, EVs have only made that worse, which I wouldn't disagree with, because electric motors are all broadly the same in terms of the characteristics they deliver. But it was ever thus that, it's ridiculous to think that 30 years ago all cars were interesting. They weren't. There was an awful lot of
bland
shite around. we only remember the good stuff. But what I think is great about the prevalence of sort of online tribes and how it can fuel a passion is that there's a whole generation of people now who are caring about the good stuff from the 90s and the 2000s. Also, the people who care about older cars. We're probably getting more tuned in if we are accepting that actually modern cars are very sort of seamlessly good at what they do, but don't necessarily ignite a passion.
Yeah.
It's what is happening is people are caring more about the old stuff, and also there is sort of a point at which cars become harder to keep going because electronically they're difficult. But up until that point, people seem to be putting more resources and more care and more worship into these cars from that sort of that cusp, that division where it was still okay to be able to keep a car going. So
totally,
Mark 1 Focus or something like that, which we all remember fondly because it was a really landmark car at the time. But then there's also it has a novelty retro value to someone who's younger than that car is.
That's right,
and you can keep on going.
Yeah.
And
run it on buttons potentially.
Exactly, yeah. But also just passion is passion for cars. And so my Instagram started serving me a lot of sort of young people just like keeping cars going. And there's that woman Tatty Reid who's got that old Defender. Well, it's not a Defender actually, it's just a 90. And there's another young woman who's got an MX-5, a Mark 1 MX-5 that she's seems to be restoring and fixing up. And there's
I love seeing old cars being appreciated. When I say old, not necessarily classed as classic, but like you say, retro.
Well, they're not classic to us because we're
old. We're far old. I know. It's that
25.
moment.
They are classic. There's that guy Candy Showroom on Instagram who has got his 7 Series, E38 7 Series, and again, it's like a youngish bloke who's got an obvious and incredible passion for the subject matter, and really puts the work in as well, and it's fantastic to see. And there's a part of me that goes, sometimes I don't quite understand what they're doing because I am now too old, but this is great. These are the people who are carrying on doing this. They're carrying on the passion, and it doesn't matter. My view as an old fucker is irrelevant. They're speaking to their generation. And if you look at their viewer numbers and whatever, they are clearly doing something right because they're very popular.
Yeah.
It's the landscape has changed, but to sort of in a half-assed way answer Phil's question, I wouldn't be too worried. If you love cars, there are other people who love cars out there, and that love comes in lots of different ways. But it's not all bad. I think you sort of have to almost filter your outlook a little bit.
Yeah. I was going to say the bad always seems to shout louder, and the darkness overpowers.
You gave up on Twitter, didn't you, quite recently?
I did. I got sick of it. I just got, whether I'll ever come back, I'm sure I will, but I think I just felt like after all these years of being on it, I felt like the negativity had overtaken the positivity, and it just got a bit like I was wasting my time on it and fighting a tide of people just shouting bad things at you, predominantly to do with EVs, and people saying things like EVs are single-handedly threatening our enthusiasm for old cars and interesting piston cars, and I was like, that's not true. If anything, they're liberating them.
Yeah, well, that's isn't it?
And that is my view. That is my real view.
They are. I mean, just not to get too.
We're being really serious shit.
I know, but it's sometimes.
And a dog is snoring in the background as we're doing it.
Ultimately, if you want to have a better attitude, be more like Molly, because she's fast asleep, snoring like a tractor, and she's happy. So maybe that's it. And she's not on Twitter or any social media.
I think the future's really bright for analog cars, because even if you have to own or want to own a more modern car to use as a white good. Take your Tesla, for example. It's a car that you've bought to do an everyday series of jobs, to slog away and be your workhorse. Do you clay bar it and stand back and admire it and take it to shows? No, you don't. But it does a thing that you want it to do, and it means that you also can own other cars potentially as well. And love the fact that young people are getting into what we would class as rare but nobody cares in a lot of ways. Because they just pick what was a bland, maybe a potentially bland car that's a bit of a survivor from 25 years ago, and they celebrate it. And also, not only that, they get to drive it and enjoy it and sort of escape in terms of like slight cosplay, but without having to borrow a shitload of money.
Yeah.
We are in a world now where kids seem to hit 19 and think that they all should have an RS3 or an A45 AMG that costs 40, 50k. And you're like, dude, you're burying yourself in debt, crippling debt.
Well, I suppose that's it, isn't it? But
to try and be cool.
Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's the thing, you find your tribe.
Yeah,
So,
some people spend 300 quid on trainers. Some people spend £13 on trainers. There's no wrong answer.
No, there's not.
As long as
That's
you're
the
not a
thing.
murderer.
No, but it is. What makes you happy, and don't harm other people, but just do whatever makes you happy and follow your beliefs. And I think that's it's, if you look at some of the most successful people online, I think they have a certain sort of integrity for pursuing their passion, and whether that's fashion or trains or cars or aeroplanes or people just like, honestly, the dog is making
The dog's he's making it sound like your profound words are actually boring.
I've also got emphysema while I'm speaking. But that's the thing. Ultimately, belief and love of a subject matter is a fantastic thing, and don't worry too much about it. So, to answer what Phil's asking, yes, there's a lot of negativity out there, but if you can tune it out and find the people who only bring the good vibes, the positivity, the love, and whatever that is, they're out there. And even if it is for EVs, and you and me both go, yeah, EVs are fine. It's just a different way of propelling a car. It has advantages and disadvantages. Be realistic about both of those things.
And we like them in our lives.
Yeah. For me personally, just having a big, comfy electric car that I can charge for bugger all at home overnight, that transports us around, is fine. It's not exciting particularly.
No,
it's satisfying.
It doesn't threaten the existence of your semi-classic Defender, does it?
No, it doesn't. And my desire to go and buy some idiotic other thing is, no, it doesn't. That's the thing, that these things can coexist, and it's not.
They totally do.
And it's not, it drives me bananas, the people who somehow believe the World Economic Foundation wants us to have EVs because they're going to control our brains.
I'm
Honestly.
terrified of those people.
I know.
And I, you know, my the Late Break Show channel is basically born on the belief that there should be a really huge variety of vehicles, and they can all be celebrated, and there's good and bad within all of those derivatives. We've never spent longer on answering a question.
Well, I know, but it's sort of...
But it's a big one.
It's a big one, because it is actually quite important, because I think I've heard this from other people going, I'm sort of falling out of love with cars. And I have to admit, I'm not as obsessively nerdy about new cars as I once was, because I've lost track a little bit, because they don't interest me as much as they did. And I can't quite figure out why, except that, you know, everything is a little more homogenous, perhaps.
I think it's also because a lot of manufacturers have lost their way slightly, because there's lots and lots of boxes they must tick, and legislation is sort of strangling them slightly, and they don't entirely know what to do. We've covered this ground before, but so there's definitely that going on.
They don't seem to have the same sort of clear-sighted view of what they stand for and what differentiates them from other people. I'm talking about the sort of what is now sometimes called the legacy manufacturers, which I think is a terribly ominous term that just basically means
ones that have been around a long time and done.
Though, but you know, sort of at one point, Mercedes and BMW were quite distinct from one another.
Yeah,
BMW made quite sporty, dynamic cars with a slightly pushy, yuppie image in the 80s, and Mercedes made slightly dour, kind of sensible, beautifully made cars that they'd spent 10 years developing.
Yeah.
And now, not so much, because Mercedes is desperately trying to be sporty, and have been for years now, haven't they, really, since the sort of, God, I don't know, when did they start doing that?
70s? 80s?
No, 80s. Well, it's sort of like
190 Cosworth.
Do you remember? Oh yeah, I suppose. But that seemed so anomalous, didn't it, at the time? Because otherwise they weren't. I mean, no, they made the SL, but that was always a bit of a cruiser.
SEC, wide body.
Yeah, they were cruisers though, weren't they?
Yeah.
That's the thing. They'd sort of leave AMG before AMG became part of the mothership. AMG was sort of this upstart, and Brabus supposedly the same, just mucking around on the perimeter. They weren't allowed to be. Mercedes themselves quite dull.
Yeah.
BMW much more fighty, but now they've all blurred into one. And Audi as well, sort of. And that's just the German manufacturers, the sort of up-spec German manufacturers.
No,
isn't it?
I think they're all definitely not.
What was well, we could go on about this for ages.
It's
so
a
maybe
massive,
this is
it's a
part
podcast
of,
in itself.
part of the problem is that manufacturers have lost sight of who they were. But equally, we are old fuckers, and we can go, well, why aren't Mercedes just like spending 10 years developing cars and only making a model range of 4 or 5 things? And because that's not how the world works. They've had to pursue younger buyers with cheaper, smaller cars, try and get them on the ladder.
Yeah.
Cheap borrowings changed everything for a few years.
Yeah.
It was a different time.
Absolutely.
It is a different time. We'll look back on this and we'll have a better perspective of it one day. But anyway, in the meantime, and on that rather serious note, we should probably bring this into
Or I could answer a quick question only from the basis of it opens from a chap called Matthew Taylor.
Yeah.
With, hello, you pair of ocean-going helmets. Which I just thought was and it's of no surprise that Matthew Taylor is Australian.
Okay.
We've all got our favourite cars to feature in films and TV shows, and they sometimes take on a supporting role. Gene Hunt's screeching Audi Quattro and Ashes to Ashes springs to mind. Maybe the agile BMW 7 Series tillered by Jason Statham in The Transporter. I thought he had an Audi.
Yeah.
Anyway, or even the red Dodge Ram in Twister. Rest in peace, Bill Paxton. My question is, have you, SSGs, ever encountered any movies or programmes where the production team totally missed the mark in terms of casting the vehicle to the character? This could be due to a contractual agreement to only use particular car brands or just not understanding the vehicle and its market. Was it the driver, the Ryan Gosling... Drive, sorry.
Yeah.
The chase scene with a Hemi 300C Chrysler chasing the Mustang. I remember it really annoyed you when it first came out.
Also, he's picked a Mustang as his getaway car, but he needs to get people in the back.
And it's a 2-door.
Yeah.
Yes,
someone's tripping over a seatbelt as they get in and face planting into the footwell. And
simply not the solution, is it?
Not practical, no.
No.
Silly. Also... do you remember Luther?
Yeah.
Good show.
Yeah.
But I suppose I could never quite figure out, because on the one hand it's like I think they sort of portrayed him living in like a really sort of concretey, quite bleak block of flats.
Yeah.
But he always had immaculate suits. And I think he drove a Volvo 740 or 760.
Yeah, the 740, because my mate Simon supplied the car for the actual show.
Did he?
Yep. Yeah.
And I could never quite get a handle on that. I was a bit like...
He owns one of Luther's cars, as it were. I think Luther uses 2.
But I was a bit like, I know the producers have chosen that because it's just an interesting retro car, and it's a classic TV trope. Just stick the lead character. If he's a sort of hard-worn, slightly tortured detective, put them in some kind of classic. But... and this relates back to what we've just been talking about now, a classic, it could be from the 80s.
Yeah, or 90s.
Or 90s. And that's kind of, it's just interesting. It marks them out.
Or noughties.
And I thought, is he really a Volvo guy?
I mean, I'd have him down as a BMW guy.
I'd have stuck him in a,
I'd have put him in a slightly rude 5 Series or
I just,
3.
Just a shark-nosed 5 Series.
Yeah, naughty.
Yeah, just keep it like that. But anyway,
it's a very good one. There's a few. I thought, was it Baby Driver?
Well, yeah,
Baby with Kevin Spacey and somebody else that I've forgotten was in it
with the Impreza.
Yeah. So actually, in that context, the car I didn't have a problem with. I had a massive problem with the way that the guy was seemingly driving it, but totally unconvincingly driving it to me.
Oh.
And everyone went on about how good it was, and I'd say 80% of the film I was just irritated. That's not the question from Matthew, who says, "You're Smith and Sniff Australian correspondent. P.S. Definitely not an Australian sex pest, although the moustache is definitely getting there. Love the show, CMTMB."
Is this because I said the other week, I said that young people here with moustaches and mullets look like Australian sex pests? Making friends wherever we go.
It's a really good question. We should put it out to the wider audience, because it is a problem for car pervs like us. We get hooked up on it, and it can ruin a film or a TV show. It can really damage us.
Oh, also, one final one is obviously when there was some weird product placement and they suddenly put Walter White and his wife out of Breaking Bad into some Chrysler Group products.
Oh, because of the Jeep Wagoneer.
Well, no, because I think originally, so Walter had the Aztec, obviously, and famously.
Yeah.
But yeah, his wife Skylar had the Wagoneer.
Yeah.
It's quite cool. But, they stopped making Wagoneers in like 91 or 92 or something. That car went on for a long time. They're very cool.
It's seriously long production period, isn't it?
But it sort of worked. And I think because Vince Gilligan, who made that show, is quite specific about car casting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They're the people that we want to make car shows, though. Look at Stranger Things. There's some great cars in Stranger Things.
I had to stop watching Stranger Things because my wife found it too spooky.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I know people have said the same thing. But I flipping love it. I mean, if nothing else, just for the synth.
Yes.
Incredible synth.
Oh, gosh. I've had an incredible synth breakthrough recently. We really have to wrap this up, but there's a...
Incredible synth breakthrough.
Right. Really quickly.
Yeah.
Online, you can find it. A film about the development of the metro. And it had this incredible synth soundtrack. Now, this would have been made, been released, being email. This would have been released in 1980 to coincide with the release of the car. So it's so of its time, kind of, for synth nerds, sort of polysynths, a lot of that. And it's just fantastic. And I sort of assumed this music had been commissioned for the BL making of the Metro documentary, or maybe that there was a British Leyland department of synths at that point, because there was that's the kind of thing that might have happened. There definitely was an in-house. There was definitely an in-house film unit.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like, why would there not also just be somewhere in Longbridge? There's just a room full of like Moogs and stuff. But anyway,
well, there's a session musician nearby. Just came in and just wank the ivories. For
you imagine that, like Renault, the equivalent would have had Jean-Michel Jarre. It's just the in-house directeur du synth.
Oh yeah,
and chef du synth, and so I'd assumed these were bespoke. I thought this was bespoke to the documentary, but no, I discovered that this is library music, but from quite a well-known sort of prolific library music producer, and you can find these tracks. I just found them on Apple Music and made my own playlist, and it's fantastic. I messaged you the other week, and I was walking through an industrial area of North London early in the morning. It was quite misty, and I was listening to a load of this polysynthy sort of library music from 1979. It was bloody great.
I need to listen to some of that.
I'll put this somewhere in the public domain.
I'll put it in you, in your ears.
But it's great. All right, look, we have to stop, but we'll be back on Monday with a recording of our live show from County Durham, and then it's Christmas, as Noddy Holder says, so maybe there won't be an Otosot on Friday because everyone will be full of turkey and sherry, but we'll be back very soon after that. But until then, whenever it is, goodbye.
Until then, whenever it is.
That's a bit Woolard. Until then, see you then.